Everybody all set? Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the public hearing for the Planning and Zoning Commission for Tuesday, February 14th, 2023. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'll ask the secretary to read our public notice.
I think we have new microphones.
Yes. So I don't think you have to get as close to these as previous.
Well, we'll see how it works. To be published in the Journal Inquirer, Friday, February 3, 2023, Thursday, February 9, 2023, South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, February 14, 2023, at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the South Windsor Town Hall to consider the following. Number 1, PZC-sponsored text amendment. Remove Section 1.4 residential moratorium on single-family subdivision and special exception permits for housing. Modifications to multiple sections of the regulations affecting single-family housing. Addition of Section 2.24 inclusionary zoning requirements for percentages of affordable units in single-family and multifamily zones, and add affordability requirements and modifications to multiple sections of the regulations related to multifamily developments. Number 2, PZC proposal to opt out of the provisions of Public Act 2129, Subdivision 9, subsection D of Section 8-2, regarding limitation on the number of parking spaces for dwelling units. Number 3, PZC-sponsored subdivision text amendment, add to definitions, Chapter 3, Sections H, inclusionary zoning requirements, I, agricultural division, J, first cut, K, lot line revisions, Chapter 4, modify Sections B and C with minor changes related to landscaping and sidewalk requirements, add Appendix B regarding street trees. Copies of the applications are on file in the office of the town clerk and/or planning department, and online at https://www.southwindsorct.gov, planning department pages, planning and zoning commission applications. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard, and written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at 860-644-2511, extension 2329. Bart Pasiconis, Chairman, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you very much. At this time, we have 2 commissioners missing. So we are going to have Commissioner Bernstein sit for Commissioner Foley and Commissioner Carey sit for Commissioner LeBlanc. Okay. Our first public hearing tonight, first, we do have new microphones. I hope these work okay for everyone. The button is really light for pushing on. It's a lot easier than the previous one. So if anyone has a cell phone, if they could just put it to vibrate, we would appreciate it. Our order of business tonight will be first to hear from our town-sponsored text amendments and proposals. Then we will hear from the public, first those in favor and then those against. Also some town staff if any additional information. Then we will hear from commissioners. So at this time, I'll get right into it. Our first is our PZC-sponsored text amendment, which is, we have a PowerPoint on that. It's the text amendment for the removing the residential moratorium on the single-family subdivision, special exception permits for housing, modifications, multiple sections of the regulations affecting single-family housing, addition of the sections 2.24 inclusionary zoning, and percentages for the affordable housing units to single-family and multifamily zones. Okay, got our first slide up here, and as I said, it's talking about the proposed single residential zoning and subdivision regulation text changes. And we'll go to the next slide. Our adopted language from which will be adding section 1.5 to the residential moratorium on the single-family subdivision and special exception for permits for housing. This is all what we originally had proposed when we started off this moratorium on the housing. We put it in place for a number of different reasons. This declared an immediate moratorium for a year so that we could review the regulations and move forward with some changes. So our next slide was the P&Z committee work. We established two subcommittees for this. One was residential multifamily subcommittee, and we've been meeting for the past 9 months to modify the regulations. The residential subcommittee evaluated quality of the developments, the open space cluster designs, minimum lot frontages, sizes, and usability of lots, usability of open space, and loss of habitats, also affordable housing. Those were all concerns that we wanted to address in making these changes to the regulations. The proposed update the zoning regulations, zoning and subdivision regulations, reviewed the modified standards for infrastructure, including roadways, sidewalks, and lighting requirements, investigated changes, minimum lot sizes, and other bulk requirements in the different zones around town based on residential build-out, created net lot area requirement to exclude steep slopes, wetlands, and easements. Reviewing the interior lot requirements and proposed changes to encourage better designs. Added to the subdivision regulations criteria related to free splits, agricultural division, and lot line revisions, and determine how to incorporate inclusionary zoning requirements into the regulations for the subdivisions. On to our next slide. We talked about the proposed zone changes and what we could do, changing the residential area, density, dimensional requirements, modify section 3.1.2A, and modify 3.1.2B. There were a lot of changes we figured that we would explore in these sections. As far as section 3.2.2, interior lots, mostly required lot depth in A20 zone, front yard setbacks, modified other text numbers regarding the underlying zone, modified stacking and screening of the adjacent land. Also, section 7.14, open space subdivisions. These were a lot of the other areas that we had concerns with, and the committee addressed these with the regulation changes. Some of them were things such as modifying the latest regulation dates, modifying to include the right-of-way and 10% of the total area of the roadway, modifying the lot sizes and setbacks in all the zones of the open space subdivisions. These were all concerns that the committee had with the old regulations. We'll move on to the next slide. We had the proposed subdivision changes, and these are excerpts of the issues that we had, which were the general provisions we want to update effective and the revision date. Definitions, we had a lot of issues with definitions through all the regulations, and we wanted to address those, as a lot of the areas of concern weren't defined how we would like them. We want to improve these. We had changes in the procedures, a lot of different modifications, such as removing 7 calendar days in Chapter 3, application. A lot of this is housekeeping, performance and maintenance, mechanics, adding requirements. Those were all concerns that we were hoping to address in these regulations. As far as the work, the P&Z's done a lot of meetings over the past 9 months to move all this forward. We're on P&Z committee work now. The multifamily committee evaluated the current regulations and proposed changes to increase affordable housing, which was mandated by the state of Connecticut. Proposed update the regulations, reviewing existing multifamily development types, current and previous, investigated changes, minimum lot requirements and other bulk requirements in different multifamily types, reviewed duplex dwellings and proposed changes to allow more flexibility, determined how to incorporate inclusionary zoning requirements into the regulations for the multifamily developments, utilizing our housing plan that we adopted this past year, and recommend to opt out of Public Act 21-29, which limits parking, the number of parking spaces that can be required in multifamily developments. What the state said in those is they have lower requirements because a lot of the other towns are cities, they have better transportation, and South Windsor isn't really a transportation hub that has a lot of busing and other mass transit options. Okay, and now we're on the incorporation of the affordable housing. We proposed adding section 2.34, inclusionary zoning requirements, which adds on the affordable requirement for all residential developments. And That's, that's more text regarding that. Proposed adding section 2.24 inclusionary zoning requirements, which adds an affordable requirement for all residential developments. So that's some more of the language that we proposed in these changes in the regulations. Down on the next slide, we have proposed zone changes, and these are some more of the excerpts. Creating a floating zone for the multifamily, 15 acres. We added a minimum 18% affordable requirement for that. With the multifamily A and multifamily AA, we've got the reduction of the minimum coverage of 5 acres with a max of 15 acres, and change the breakdown in the sections 3.4.5A, unit mix, efficiencies, 1 bedrooms, 60%, 4 bedrooms, 5% or less, 3 bedrooms, 5% or less, 2 bedrooms, the remainder. And then we had the senior resident developments add section 17.7 as special exception use, and the affordable component, where there was none before, it was add minimum 15% requirement for those units. We also had the multifamily assisted housing, which we add to the commercial zones, 15 units per acre, a maximum 80 units. And we have an affordable component, which depends on the project. We must meet the state affordable guidelines. So then we have the town center core, which we already had regulations in there for the town center core, but where we had a 10% affordable component previously, it was increased to 15%. We have the overlay zone, again, that was the center core. We got the town center north, which again, the language pretty much stayed the same, but the affordable component was increased from the 10% to the 15%. And then some more examples of the changes. Buckland Gateway Zone is staying the same at 12.5% for the affordable component. Assisted living, independent living facilities, there was no affordable component before. Now it's adding a minimum 15% affordable component. Sullivan Overlay Zone, it was 10%. It's going to go up to 15% affordable requirement for any new projects. Anything that's already been approved is under the previous language on all of these proposals. Then we have the duplex section, which the change in that would be subject to affordable housing fee and count as an individual unit if part of a subdivision. Okay, and the next slide, payment in lieu of constructing affordable housing units. This was a difficult section for us to address. Table 1, fee in lieu of affordable housing calculations. This is something that is pretty new to the state of Connecticut. And we had to explore, well, Michelle explored, our town planner explored a lot of options that other towns had proposed. But this possible fee in lieu of is based on 5%. So it would be the construction cost per square foot for 1 and 2 family residents pursuant to most recent building valuation data for type VB construction from the International Code Council. So that would cover rural residential, A40, AA30, A30, and A20. And there's different square foot totals that are possible for there. Sample is a 10-lot subdivision in the rural residential and A40 zone. AA30 would be 0.05 times 1,500 square feet times a multiplier of 10. And that's 150.87 equals $11,950. So if you had in the A30 zone, using that formula, it would be $90,522. In the A20 zone, it would be $75,435. And the A20 zone is mentioned twice there. I'm not sure why I repeated the same information. But that gives you an overview of what the Planning and Zoning Commission started with and the changes that we went through in getting to this point. So at this point, I'm going to turn to our Director of Planning, Michelle Leip, and see if there's anything else that she wanted to add.
Thank you. Just a couple things. We did have our town attorney review specifically the inclusionary zoning section of the regulations, since this is new being added into the regulations. And I want to put on the record his brief comments, and then he did mark up that section with some suggested text, and I'll pass it out to the commission for consideration. So he says, I'm agreeable to the manner in which you're using the International Building Code to calculate the fee in lieu of creating affordable units. I've made the payment in lieu of discretionary on the part of the applicant and on the commission when reviewing the application as opposed to mandatory to give both the commission and the applicant some flexibility. However, either a certain number of affordable units or a fee is a requirement and must be part of the application. Happy to discuss this further. So again, there's just some minor text changes that he suggested based on that comment, and I'll pass it out for the commission to consider. The other thing I just wanted to put into the record too is I did work with Glenn Chalder a little bit, our consultant, on some of the inclusionary language, and he's had some minor text changes again based on reviewing this that I'd like to put into the record and for consideration when we, look to finally adopt some language. Mainly, just briefly, like instead of talking about just all zones, that we're looking for affordable housing in zones and in developments. So just to clarify, adding developments as language. And again, I'll give you a copy of all this. The only other thing in this presentation tonight, I realized that there was a minor calculation in the subdivision example. So I just want to clarify that. Essentially, when you come up with your number, whether it was a 90,000 number, you would divide that by the number of lots to really understand per lot cost, if you will. And I can say on average, it was somewhere between an $8,000 and $11,000 per lot cost in our subdivisions when you looked at the formula. So that the table did have an error tonight, and I do want to correct that. But just for the edification of the public, that's kind of what it comes down to with a subdivision. Whereas in our multifamily zones, we're looking for a percentage of lots. or I'm sorry, percentage of units. We really didn't offer a buyout in the multifamily section of this particular regulation. So again, I'll add these to the record as minor edits that I would suggest to that language. And then that's all I have for staff comment. We did receive CROG's referral notice back, and I do want to read those into the record, so let me find those. This is dated January 20th. It says, and this is basically all the text regulations, with the exception of the duplex. I realized I neglected to send that with the first round, so thus I have two reports to read to you. So the first one's based on the text. It says the staff of the Regional Planning Commission, the Capital Region Councils of Governments has reviewed the zoning referral and finds no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or the concerns of neighboring towns. Staff commends the town of South Windsor for its care for efforts in providing more affordable housing and choice and housing for all ages and income. That was submitted by Jennifer Bartis Early, the chairman. The second one I have, again, is related to the duplex regulation specifically. This is dated February 13th, 2023. The staff of the Regional Planning Commission and Capital Region Council of Governments has reviewed the zoning referral and finds no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or the concerns of neighboring towns. CROG commends the town for its effort in expanding housing choices for all ages and incomes. Per the municipality's residential area density and dimensional requirements chart, staff recommends revisiting requirement that duplexes need to exceed the minimum lot size by 24%. With this additional requirement, staff believes an additional and unnecessary burden will be placed on duplex development, which conflicts with regional POC land use goals as well as housing goals. And again, respectfully submitted, Jennifer Bartis Early, chairman. And I'll submit those to the commission for the record.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so at this time, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone who would like to comment on these text amendment changes? Roy Norman? Rob, I'll call you next. Okay, just make sure your microphone, yep, good.
Hear me all right?
You can hear you great.
Good. Thank you for your service. I follow in the newspapers and reports, and you really have a lot of challenging work and challenging time that you're facing, and I commend you all for that. My late wife, Nancy, she served on a committee in the late 1980s, and it was a affordable housing committee. And they came up with some, so I'm kind of going from memory, that's kind of a long time ago. But out of that came some recommendations, and I believe the plan unit development process or zoning came out of that. I think one of the first ones was Wapping Avenue, which is on Ayers Road. And I can remember, this is where the challenge comes in for affordable, who can afford it, what the market happens with the market. I remember when I was serving on a town council, we had a family come before us, and their unit, the unit they were living in Wapping Avenue, was one that was designated as affordable. And at that time, I guess they were allowed an escalation factor to go into what the cost was, and went up from there. And by the time they got through with that, they were appealing to have their unit not designated as affordable because they couldn't find anybody that could afford the housing. I suspect at the time, real estate agents really weren't out looking for people that could buy into affordable housing. But if you look at some of the market changes that have occurred with those units, there's another plan unit development that's across from the Priest Farm, and then Austin Circle. Those are three that I'm familiar with. But when you look at some of the pricing in the market that's gone up and down, you don't have any control of that. And I don't know, you've got a lot of good things in your regulations, and, this is just some challenges, and I don't know how you can regulate that other than, there's subsidizing and that sort of thing. But I throw that out to you as kind of some history and see how that fits in with all of your regulations. You've certainly done a lot of detailed work there, but I think it still will be a challenge. I think South Windsor has done very well with affordable housing over the years, but I don't know, I live in what's classified as a ranch house, and the assessment went up big time because all those nice, affordable ranch houses you see along Ellington Road and elsewhere, people are moving in, a market price on that has gone up, and so if you live in a ranch house, as Steve knows, boy, the assessment has just skyrocketed. So you're looking at a lot of units that we had were affordable, probably built during the war, and I would say that a lot of those are now going to be out of the class of affordable. So I don't know how you manage all of that, but I throw that out as a little bit of history and observation. Thank you for your time.
Okay, and Roy, if you could, the sign-in sheet right there.
Sure.
And just introduce yourself. I know I recognized you as Roy Norman, but your name and address.
Yeah, Roy Norman, Homestead Drive.
Thank you. And anyone else coming up to speak, you're welcome to either sign in before you speak or after you speak. It's totally up to you, as long as you take care of that. Thank you, Roy. Rob?
Good evening, Commission members. Robert Manarino. I reside at 585 Clark Street in South Windsor. I'm also president of Manarino Builders. And I just wanted to come tonight out of respect for all the work you guys have done, writing all these, the new regulations and amendments and what have you. But I thought I would just give you some input, since I've had a lot to do with some of these projects, in the town that have had affordable components. And one of them is, I don't know if the commission has discussed, what is an affordable single-family unit, based on the Hartford median income. Based on the last development we did on Clark Estates, that could be as high as $455,000 for a sale price. That would be considered an affordable unit for a single-family home, according to CROG. And then I don't know what some of the numbers are for the multifamily. So I just wanted to let you know about that in case that's not something you discussed. And maybe you have discussed that. I'm kind of late to the party here, and you guys put a ton of work in over the last year. But really what got my interest also for coming this evening was the senior residence development. And you're bringing that back in for whatever reason you thought. So I thought I'd have some input on that, since we have done at least one of those communities in town about 15 years ago. It was very successful. I just finished doing 76 units in Enfield, the 55 and older, and there was a great need for that too. We've been there for the last 4 or 5 years. But I always wondered why we had the maximum unit size. And what we found in doing these, that really we needed somewhere between 2,000 and 2,400 square feet for the market units. Seems to be what people wanted, what people would like to have. I understand the 1,400 square foot unit. That's very challenging. We do seem to build units that are around 1,650 square feet in one of our developments. And that's basically a 2-bedroom and 2 full bath and a nice area for kitchen and family room. So making a suggestion that possibly these square footage numbers have been here for many years, and they go back to DA15s and DRZs and things of that nature. And so I'm just suggesting that maybe you just look at those square footage numbers to maybe up those a little bit. 1,400 square feet for a $400,000 ranch, we want to make sure we can market that. If you think about someone going out there, things of that nature. And I never really understood why only 30% could be 1,800 square feet. I never understood that. We always, as developers or builders, we just try to follow the rules and, fit where we can. But other than that, I do think that the town of South Windsor has been on the forefront of affordable housing, and also with being very proactive on different type of zoning options. And I do appreciate that over the last 35 years. So thank you very much. Just some suggestions on the senior resident development.
Thank you.
Joe Kennedy, 81 Allison Drive. First, I'd like to thank the commissioners for their dedication and the hours of work they did just to update the regs here. I'm here in favor of eliminating the moratorium on single housing units. The increase in economic activity will help stabilize our tax rate. So economic growth is always good. On affordable housing, Councilor Norman, he spoke. I'm always in favor of it. I know the chair has been in favor of affordable housing as far as the rest of the commissioners. I'm going to give you a little segue. I go way back. I came here in 1958 with my parents. They bought a 3-bedroom ranch. My father put $100 down on a 3-bedroom ranch, and the price was $12,000. So, you know, South Windsor is a great town. People just want to come here, and I applaud the commissioners for putting the affordable aspects in it. Then my true heart is open space. I want to thank you for all the open space. You, Open Space Task Force, the Agricultural Land Preservation Commission, wetlands. We've done a great job in this town of keeping a rural aspect. We don't have suburban sprawl. You go down the middle of Sylvan Avenue, you got some nice open space. I mean, you guys done a great job, so I commend Bart and the rest of the commissioners on the open space. So thank you guys very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Hi, I'm Ben Tripp. I'm a director with the Metro Realty Group. I will sign in. Is there a pen up here? Thank you. Let's do that first.
Thank you.
So I, again, also want to reiterate appreciation for all the work that you've done on this, as well as town staff. I know it's taken a lot of time and it's not easy, so appreciate all of the effort that you've put into this. I sent to town staff a few recommendations for modifications to the MAHZ component of the, so the multifamily assisted housing and residential/commercial zones. So I'll just go through a few of those recommendations, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on why I think those modifications are important. So the first change is under 7.22.2b. It is removing the density, the maximum density requirement from this portion of the regulation. So the reason for that really is the regulation already has a maximum number of units, which is 80 units, and it has a minimum acreage of 4 acres, and also governs building height pretty specifically as well, mostly 2-story, 35 feet. So within those elements, it seems the maximum density is pretty well regulated, pretty well defined. And my concern with the density as stated here as a number per net buildable acre is really that the definition of net buildable acre includes things that are perhaps unknown at the outset of the development, such as utility easements, precise size of detention areas, and there are other elements of that definition that are pulled out of the gross acreage. So I feel like for understanding what really the number of apartments that could be yielded on a site at the outset, just relying on that 80 total units would be significantly more, just clearer for the developer approaching a site. Alternatively, if you converted from 15, currently it's 15 units per net buildable acre. If it were just 15 units per acre, similarly, it gives you that level of clarity. Some of this is just, I think, administrative, and for the location of the zone, adding back in AA30, it was removed in the proposed zoning, and the reason for adding it back, there's a development on 175 Oakland Road which utilizes this MAHZ, and AA30 is the underlying zone there. So just to be sure that this modified regulation doesn't take this existing development out of compliance. So I recommended some language on building height. It seemed like the regulation was modified to bring in the underlying commercial zone, perhaps to increase what the maximum height could be on, in a particular development. In some instances, the reliance on the underlying commercial zone actually decreases the maximum height. For example, in the Gateway Development Zone, if you're within 125 feet, I think it is, from a public right-of-way, your maximum height is 30 feet. The existing MAHZ allows a maximum height of 35 feet. It doesn't sound like a big difference, but on a two-story building with a gabled roof, you get very close and likely above that 30-foot limitation. So it seems that for a two-story building, a 35-foot with gabled roof maximum height would be appropriate. I recommended some language on contiguous parcels. Because there's a limitation on what zones this MAHC applies to, there's some scenarios where in an adjacent zone, an adjacent lot, if it's owned or controlled by a developer who's going through an application, it may not be able to be pulled into the application. And so the recommendation is that because that lot couldn't be incorporated into that application, I'm recommending that you still be allowed to use the acreage of that lot for the purposes of coverage and building coverage calculations, provided that that lot is put into permanent conservation or permanent open space. And really the last thing is, on the topic of open space, the regulation suggests 20% as the minimum open space. I recommend you look at perhaps 15%, particularly because affordable housing is typically very challenging to reserve a significant amount of open space when you're dealing with the financial constraints that come along with attempting to develop affordable housing. I know here this regulation provides the commission with ultimately the ability to reduce that number should there be access to sidewalks and other amenities that the site provides. So I understand that there is some flexibility there. I would say of the changes I'm recommending, that's the one that I'm probably least, I think is least important. I do appreciate the benefit of open space, and so if the commission feels strongly on that point, I do understand. So that's really it. I would be happy to answer any questions you have on any of those modifications or about the regulation in general. I've studied it pretty closely.
Sir, I didn't get your name, and I probably have some questions later.
Sure. Ben Tripp.
Ben?
Yeah, Ben, last name's Tripp, T-R-I-P-P. And I'm a director with the Metro Realty Group.
Ben Tripp. Yep. Ben, under building setbacks, there's a sentence that says, for the purpose of clarity, commercial properties include.
Yeah, include but are not limited to. So the distinction there, you're right, I skipped that part. The distinction there is that you may, because there are different setbacks depending on who your abutter is, and residential has a larger setback. Oftentimes, some people may consider apartments to be residential. The assessor classification classifies it as commercial, as it does with the assisted living developments. So just so there isn't confusion when an application is put forth as to whether or not an apartment is classified as a commercial use or a residential use, I just wanted to add that language, that clarifying language.
Yeah, I think the issue there with some of our regulations might address something as residential. In the multifamily, I understand commercial, but some of our language that's existing might classify something as residential versus commercial. So I think that's maybe something we have to look at.
Okay. And I know that the language in here, it kind of distinguishes between commercial zones / properties, and I think the intention there was to say there are some commercial properties that are in residential zones, and yeah, so, yeah, I understand your, what you're saying and how there may be a conflict there, so, but ultimately, my hope is that to the extent that you're abutting a use that's considered a commercial use, that the commercial setback would be applicable.
Okay. Okay, that it?
That's it for me, unless you guys have any questions.
Okay, while he's up here, does anybody have any questions, comments? I think everything you presented was pretty clear and
Okay.
appreciate your input.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Good evening, Chairman Pasconis and members of the commission. For your record, Peter DeMalley, reside at 35 Peterson Way. I'm also urban planner and president of Design Professionals, 18-person consulting practice here at 21 Jeffrey Drive. And by the way, 85% of our work is not in South Windsor. So just to let you know that. This is very comprehensive, and I love the ideas that you're coming up with. A lot of them, I have some suggested modifications, food for thought on some of them, but I really appreciate you looking comprehensively at what we have for zoning, what we had in the past, and going forward. We definitely need affordable housing, and I absolutely appreciate that 10% with projects will not move the needle. We have to go beyond that, otherwise we'll make no progress. So 10% affordable. So I'm in support of that, but I have a few suggested changes as we go along. I'm in favor of also eliminating the moratorium, but of course, once you've digested all this and come up with some final regulations. And one other thought is that, I know Joe's here, and he's from the Economic Development Commission, Joe Kennedy, is also from an economic development perspective, and that's it. Many communities do multifamily as one of their largest increases in their grand list, their tax base. We are going to be confronted with some tax increases and a lot of challenges to our town budgets as we go forward. There's no question about that. There's going to be a huge demand on the tax base, and it's not growing all that fast right now. So having multifamily developments, higher density developments, cautionary how you approach it, but if we have that, many communities, that's your largest taxpayer, and you can make out very well by that. I've been approached by many communities throughout Connecticut and other towns, other states that we deal with, and if you do large multifamily developments in the right location, right controls, attractive, and right now we have to look at how many children you're generating. I understand your appreciation for that, but that can really help you grow your grand list to offset the demands on services and cost appreciation that we have. And a lot of towns are very successful in applying that. I just went out to see Ben Wheeler, who's our Director of Operations, but he's only part-time now as of January 1st. We took a tour of the Columbus region and some of the most prosperous, most beautiful areas around there. Particularly, I saw the northeast and eastern suburbs, and they have some beautiful developments, and they have 4 or 5 story multifamily buildings, and it really helps their tax base, and they're attracting the young workforce that we're unable to attract in this area to the degree that we need for all of our current employers. And I know one is moving to Boston in this area. One reason is because they can't attract and retain the workforce. I'll only go through some of these regulations, draft regulations that you have. One thought before I get into what you propose is that I don't think the DRZ, Design Residence Zone, is being brought forth. You repealed that a few years back. That really is pretty much for this town the future of subdivisions, because we don't have enough large tracts for subdivisions, for any large subdivisions. Mr. Manarino's here. He's got 19 lots. Yeah, something like 19 lots there off Barber Hill Road. And we just don't have the land for large subdivisions. We had a whole series of that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but we just don't have the land for that. You're not going to see many large subdivisions. I mean, if you count on one hand the large tracts that might be possible in the future, but I think it's over a very long period of time. So I don't see us doing large subdivisions, very infrequent. I don't think we'll ever see another Deming Hill Estates or something of that size. So food for thought. We can concentrate on subdivisions, not going to make a lot of difference. But I think the future of subdivisions is going to be something more along the lines of a DRZ. They're going to be smaller parcels. They're going to be closer together than you have for a conventional subdivision. They're going to be more affordable because the land costs per unit go down. And I think that's where the future is for single-family subdivisions with detached homes. So I hope you'll consider at some point, maybe the wrong timing because of what's happening with the school system, but at some point I hope you'll consider bring back the design residence zones and maybe modify it, but bring it back nevertheless, because I think that's where the future is for subdivisions. I do like going through this, section 2.5 on page 2. It sounds like a reasonable idea of allowing non-conforming lots to be combined, and you're going to 80%? Oh, okay.
Michelle,
Yeah.
your microphone's not on.
But that certainly seems like a very reasonable approach to that situation.
I was just commenting that that was language that got lost over the years that we're reinstating back into the regulation. So it was
Yeah,
a way to
okay.
approach lots.
No wonder I
previously.
like it. I used to like
You
it when I
probably
was
wrote
here.
it.
Okay. So I like that a lot. I think it's great that you're bringing that back. That's very thoughtful to do that. Then when you start getting into inclusionary zoning.
Excuse me, you referenced a section I'm still trying to find. in my-
Page 2 at the top, the part in red. The first paragraph down in red. And if you have lots that are non-conforming, that are contiguous, you can reconfigure those lots so that they're 80% of the size of the zone in which they're located. So you actually do something with it. I think that's a very reasonable thing. We used to have it, and I'm glad you're considering bringing it back. I think it's a great approach. It's not going to be too small, but you can make it work. I think that's an appropriate thing to do.
Do you have the section number on that one, Peter?
Yeah, section 2.5. Top of page 2. I don't know if you printed it out the same way I
Well,
did. Above corner visibility on page 2?
Right, and
May I go
it's
forward?
not
just-
on this particular one, but we had multiple that we're working off of.
Second page, you had section 2.5 and just this red section?
Okay. Okay,
I'm still lost.
yeah.
Okay,
Just a minute.
okay, sure.
It would have been a copy that you got at the, not in your packets, but from the previous meeting when you got all the regulations given to you, it would have been part of that packet. They're done sequentially, so it would be starting at the beginning of the zoning text changes.
Yeah, that's-
It looks like Stephanie's got it, yes. They may not have them in the same order. so I'm not sure.
Okay. It- Steve, I believe it's this one here he's talking about.
What's the cover sheet look like?
You probably had the chart on the first part of it, and then it goes into the regulation. Kind of identified all the changes.
Peter, just so I know I have the right one, could you read that paragraph?
Yes. A group of adjacent lots of record under the same ownership at the time of adoption of these regulations may be redivided in accordance with the requirements of the subdivision regulations of the town into larger lots having not less than 80% of the required lot area and 80% of the required lot width. All other yard requirements of section 10 must be maintained. And yeah, I remember it now, it's coming back. I remember that's what was in there before, and that's a great idea.
Is that one right there? I had it in residential text. Okay. Yeah, this is the one I've got, so if somebody else needs it. Do you have the right one, Alan? Okay. I thought I saw you one. This is. Okay. Okay.
We're trying not to send out too much more paper, but maybe we should have.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you had the
Okay.
same order that we had in the public. Sorry about that.
That's,
That's, the red one is the paragraph you read. Okay,
Okay, if you'd restate your position on this one.
Sure, I'm in favor of what's in red. I guess you have it in red, the new language.
yep,
I'm in favor of doing that, so if you have non-conforming lots, contiguous non-conforming lots, you can reconfigure those, they're undeveloped, of course, you can reconfigure those into new lots that are 80% of the normal standard for that zone. So it's a great way of resolving a situation where you have some contiguous lots that don't work.
okay.
Okay, so I'm in favor of what you're proposing on that count. Going down, and I'm just going in the order that we got them as we downloaded them from your, from the internet, the town website. Section 2.24, inclusionary zoning. Going to the first section, which is 2.24.3, affordable requirements for subdivisions. Just a couple of things on that. First of all, just for matter of fact, if you do this, the lots will become more expensive and the homes will become more expensive. I think that's a given. But when you do this, when you implement this, you might want to consider at what point that has to be paid. Is it 8,000 to 11,000 you figured?
yeah, so basically, the way the regulation's written is you come up with a number, whether it's, let's just say it's a $100,000 number, it's required to be done at the time of the filing of the Mylars. It's not like your open space fee where we do it divided by the lots. It wasn't written that way. That may be something we want to consider.
Yeah, so my suggestion is that, like you do for open space subdivisions, you know, sometimes as a lot gets sold, that can be paid at that time. I think it'll be helpful to the developer. If they're going to incur this additional cost, allow them to do it at the time of closing when they have the money, as opposed to upfront, which increases their upfront burden as they're building the infrastructure and paying for the land. I think that might be a reasonable concession to the development community.
And I just could comment on that. How we've done it with our open space fee is, once the fee has been determined, we put something on the land record and basically lien those properties, if you will, for what the fee is. So even if it is 5 years from now, you know, a title searcher will find that, and it does, it's worked pretty well over the years to get it at the time of the sale of the property.
Okay, going to multifamily section of 2.24.
B.
Item B, uppercase B. You're suggesting 15% affordable. If we go back, and also I know later on you say 4.5 units per acre, which is what's been for quite a while, but that's not how it started. This regulation was developed when I was director of planning about 40 years ago, and the commission asked me to work with the former mayor and a late attorney, Ed Lastman, who is representing some developers, to come up with some draft regulations, and then they eventually modified and adopted it for that zone. And in that zone, the density was 8 units per acre. Everybody thought that commission and development committee thought that was a reasonable density. We since dropped it to 4.5. 4.5 is a reasonable density if you're having garages with every unit, but if you're not having a garage with every unit, that's low. I just thought I'd bring that to your attention, and I thought maybe you could also do it, some kind of incentive program when you do these densities, or the requirement for affordable units. Maybe you have some kind of incentives. I know when you did the Tempo 2 development, the next 165 units in the back of Evergreen Walk, I think you made it 12%, if I recall correctly, affordable. You're going up to 15. Perhaps there could be some inducements so that you go, maybe the standard is 12%, but if you want to, if you go up to 15%, you could have, you know, maybe 8 dwelling units per acre, which is the original model for the multifamily zone. And then maybe if they go up to 10 units per acre, something 17.5% would have to be affordable. And so you have some incentives for them. They go up in density, they get something out of it, and you get more toward your goal. and it accelerates it toward your goal of 10% townwide. So just food for thought. I think incentives like that, I think development community might, as long as it stays at 80% affordable, if 80% of the median income, I think that's a reasonable approach. 'Cause
Which section are you referring to, Peter? Exactly. I just want to make sure.
It's B, that's section 2.24.3, uppercase B, which says multifamily at the top, and paragraph 1.
Okay.
When you get into the second to last sentence in that paragraph, I find it a little confusing. For the purpose of this regulation, the term multifamily is defined as a single property with 2 or more dwelling units, whether attached or detached. Is that consistent with current definition for multifamily?
Michelle, your microphone, please.
It is a new definition of it.
Okay. I found that a little bit confusing, but maybe I'm the only one who's confused, but might want to take a look at that. Okay, thank you. Okay, if we go to, also to the back of the table 3.1.2A, top of page 5 for the public.
Yep.
On multifamily, you're dropping from 15 acres minimum down to 5. Yeah, we don't have land available for 15 for much of anything, but sometimes we have it. But I think we've been talking about 5-acre zoning for multifamily for a long time, and we'll actually may see some of that. I'm very supportive of that. I think it's a great idea to do that. There just are so few parcels where you're going to have the multifamily zone qualify that are 15 acres in size. So I think that's a great idea. Then you get into the buildable area. If you drop down page 5 to section 3.1.2B. Most important factor, of course, you're going, instead of allowing the 90 by 90 foot square that's required for every building lot in South Windsor in a subdivision for residential, to have a 90 by 90 foot square. We started at the front street line. Now you're moving it half the distance back of the front yard. So in a RR zone, rural residential development zone, that would be 50 feet. Half of that would be 25 feet back. It makes it more difficult to meet that 90 by 90 foot square. So we're going to end up with better lots. No question, each individual lot will be better. There's no question. I think that's a good goal. Larger lots, they will be on average larger lots. No question about that. So do we want to go that route? If we do, that's fine. But we're going to get larger lots, better lots. There'll be more expensive lots because there are fewer lots per given acreage. And also, there'll be more expensive homes as a result that they're bigger lots and you get fewer lot yield. Just food for thought. And when you get into, then you go drop down to bottom page 5, you start section 3.2.2 interior lots. When you're requiring in an RR zone, so double the lot depth. Lot depth is 200 feet, if I recall correctly, in the RR zone, which is our basic 1 acre zoning district. Majority of towns zone builder's acre, 40,000 square feet. So if you do that, you double the required lot depth. Right now, you only have double the lot size, so 40,000 square foot lot can be, after the access way, can be 80,000 square feet, basically 2 builder's acres. That's reasonable. But when you go to 400 feet minimum, and you go by the minimum lot width requirement, after you get past the access way, you create a lot width. It's got to be 1.5 times 175 feet of frontage. That means it's 262.5 feet in lot width. Okay, that's the minimum. And if you have a rectangle, okay, you'll have 400 feet back by 262.5. That means it's going to be a minimum of 105,000 square feet. Now, they may be twisted a little bit, not perfectly rectangular, but so if you go 400 feet back by 262.5, that's not 80,000 square feet beyond the access way. That's 105,000 square feet. So that's 2.625 times the 40,000 square feet, rather than 80,000 square feet, your original intent. Which is 2 times. So just thought I'd let you know that the minimum, for the most part, there could be some twists and turns with that, how you define where the depth is reached. You know, maybe it's on one line instead of the other, maybe not both lines, but, so there may be adjustment there, but you're really 2.625 times the size. So it's going to be roughly 105,000 square feet for the most part when you're creating these lots. So it's going to be more difficult to do it, so there'll be vastly fewer lots in any of these zones for interior. If that's your intent, that's fine, but just want to bring that to your attention. And also, when you, down in section 8, under approval criteria, 322C, approval criteria, section 8, there are no established front yard setbacks. However, minimum setbacks shall be that of the underlying zone. So I'm a little confused. I mean, however, minimum setback, is that front yard setback? Is that referring to that?
Yes, correct. So in other words, you wouldn't have a situation where you could propose 20 feet off a property line for the setback. It would have to be a minimum of what the underlying.
So you go
zone
down
is.
the access way, if it's in the RR zone, having 50-foot setback, I think is appropriate. That's what your intent is?
Yes.
Okay, I'm in favor of that. That's fine. And in section 11 on page 7, that's the last item in that series of items. It looks like you can have lots behind one another, provided that you have landscaping, you separate them and all that. So you can have that. Okay.
I think we found that it had been permitted that way in certain designs, so we wanted to write a regulation that would allow it.
Yeah, I think that's great, yeah. But you have to have a good design. And I think that's good to require that. Going to the multifamily zone, you maximum 12 units in a building. If we're interested in keeping the cost down overall, if we can have more units in the building, that's better.
What section are you on?
We're in section 3.4, which starts at top of page 8, the multifamily residential zone. And as you go halfway through it, it says 3.4.3 density requirements, uppercase B, 12 units be housed within a single building. And that's a carryover from a long time ago.
Correct.
But if you allow for larger buildings, you can cut down on the cost per unit and make it more affordable.
Page 8. B.
Sorry, page 8,
No more than 12.
3.43, uppercase B, under density requirements. And also, you can go higher. It's not a problem for the fire department. We've heard from fire chief, 4 or 5-story buildings are not a problem. And often they're going to be fire suppression systems within the buildings always as well. So perhaps you can go higher than 2 stories, but you have to think of where they might go. But 3, 4, 5-story buildings are not a problem these days, and you get the density up, and they make it more affordable for more people. May not hit that 15%, or that affordability threshold under 80% rule, but more people can afford them. If we go down to unit mix under multifamily, where you're saying 60% of the units need to be efficiency in 1 bedroom.
This is 3.4.6.
Yes, sorry about that. Halfway down, page 9. For multifamily, if we're trying to make it multifamily for families, if we're a community of families, we should, my son, okay, he's got a boy and a girl, right? They need, as they get to a certain age, they need 3-bedroom house. Mom and dad, kid, the boy and the girl have separate bedrooms. That's 3 bedrooms. The trend is for, nationwide, the trend is for more smaller lots and more multifamily housing for the young workforce and young families. That tends to be the trend. They don't necessarily want to have the big lot like I have with the big lawn and all that. So food for thought. Families are going to be going into this. This may be the wrong timing for South Windsor to do this because you're concerned about the increase in school children generation from housing developments, which is primarily right now causing the turnover of 3, 4, and 5-bedroom units. But it also is attributed in part to new housing. But in the long run, this town should be doing multifamily that accommodates families. So if you have 2 or 3 kids or whatever, where are you going to live? You don't have to live in a single-family home. Why can't you live in a multifamily home that can accommodate the family? So maybe not now, but I think having 60% one-bedroom and efficiency units and very little in the way of two-bedroom units and 3 and 4-bedroom units, you're going to restrict this community and other communities that they do the same thing to supporting normal families. Families that sometimes have no kids, but they also can have 1 kid, 2, 3 kids, 3 or 4. Right now, it's a hot-button issue with respect to the schools, but this town should allow multifamily development for families with 3 or 4 or 5 people. I came with 5 kids, but my family, but that's a different situation to today. That's a big family today, post-World War II. On page 12, the end of it, says section 3.4.12, affordability requirements. This is part of the multifamily zone, I believe, and it refers to SRD in the first sentence, and it refers to 18%. It's the first time I've seen an 18% in any of these. Okay, and should say, was the intent, previously you said in multifamily it would be 15%, and now this says 18%. So do we want it 15 or 18?
I think.
This is an SRD, though.
No. I think
No.
where the mistake is, under inclusionary says a minimum of 15% unless otherwise specified. So we intended for 18% in the multifamily. And so that's a mistake of the SRD reference, but when you look at the inclusionary
Oh, so that should be
section,
multifamily? Okay.
it should be 18% in the multifamily. So we said 15% unless identified otherwise in the regulations. So the proposal was 18 in the multifamily zone.
Oh. That's a lot. I go back to my original comment. I think you should have a sliding scale or something so that you can have incentives to get up to 18%, which is very high, and I don't know many communities are doing that. That's a lot of units. Developers don't make money on the 80% units. They don't make any money. They're lucky to break even on those. They lose money on the 60%, a lot, and they make money on their normal market rate ones. So if you go up to 18%, that's a lot for them to bear. So maybe there's some kind of sliding scale in there in terms of the percentage, but I think that's a lot. It was on the bottom of page 12, section 3.4.12, the end of the multifamily section. Mark? And I like, if we go over to the north overlay zone, part of your corridor zone regulations, so the corridor north, you say in the bottom, page
Which
14,
which number, Peter?
that would be page 14, section 5.7,
Yep.
5.7.11, A, B, C, D, uppercase D, multifamily limitation. You can modify it. So the regulations were written so you have, some of them so you have a commercial component, like on the first floor. That doesn't always work. It's nice when it does, but it doesn't always work. The commission on a 2/3 majority vote can modify the requirements for commercial.
Again, give me that number, Peter.
Let me go back to, excuse me. Page 14, but section 5.7.11, uppercase D, multifamily limitation.
Okay.
So I think that's a good addition to the regulations. Page 16, which is the SAMUD regulations, Sullivan Avenue Mixed-Use Development Overlay Zone, which is section 5.10B, general standards. Then, excuse me, D. I'm doing this? Hold on. 15, 16. Does it go to D? B, C. Why does it say D in here? That'd be 10.
It shouldn't say B.
10, yeah, there must be a typo there. But it's section 10, top of page 16, the second paragraph. You're referring to 15% now for residential within the Sullivan Avenue mixed-use development zone. That only applies to new developments, because I know on one development over on Sullivan Avenue, you've already approved the general plan zone change. I believe that only refer to new developments. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. New developments. Okay. I guess I gather from Michelle that assisted living facilities still count toward the 10%, right? Independent do, but not assisted living. So in here, you're requiring 15%.
What number, Peter?
Oh, I'm sorry. Page 19, section 7.3, assisted living facilities, independent living facilities.
7.3.10?
Yes, yes. So I believe this applies to assisted living facilities and independent living facilities, right? So you're saying 15% of assisted living facilities would have to have, 15% of the units would be affordable at 80% of the median. I guess because they're counting those toward the even assisted living facilities?
They count as group quarters, which I think go towards our unit count.
Really? Wow. Okay, that will just discourage some assisted living facilities. We have a lot of them in town. We have, what, 4 now? Maybe more coming, but that could discourage them coming, and they're really net revenue generators for the town, from what I've heard. Oh, and then under elderly housing, you're proposing on page 21, which is section 7.7, 7.7.5, which is area and dimensional requirements. So you are midway through page 21, underneath the table for minimum lot and area requirements. The second paragraph, you indicate that you're adding a maximum density for elderly at 10 units per acre, multiplied by the net buildable acreage. So you have to read net buildable acreage, 15% slopes gets extracted, and detention basins and wetlands and other things. So with the remaining lands, you're going to have some of those elements. So you're not going to get 10 units, but you're reducing it to 10 units per acre. Previous developments didn't have that. That would be Berry Patch and Watson Farm and all those other developments, which met a lot of the housing needs for seniors in our community, big time, when the town public housing authority could not get funding to do developments. Private sector came in and did that, created hundreds of units, and they now pay taxes to the town. I think putting a restriction on there that, I wouldn't do that. I would keep it the way it was, because it has to be in conjunction with the housing authority of the town anyways, as co-applicant, or on town land. So I think having 10 units per acre, I would suggest you not do that, because we're trying to bring housing to meet the unmet housing needs of the community. And for seniors, I would suggest you not do that. Hopefully we'll have some more, because we need more. As a percentage of our town, we have a very small percentage that's senior housing. Very small percentage. Most towns have a lot more than this. Just go to any town around here, like Vernon and stuff, they have a lot more. Open space subdivision, there's a blank, top of page 23, that's section 7.14. Subdivision is approved between 8199 and XXX. Oh, date of adoption, okay, thank you. Date of adoption, okay. On section 7.17, senior residence development, page 25, I'm absolutely delighted that you're bringing this back. I had no clue why you repealed it a few years back, along with the DRZ. DRZ may have had something to do with school child generation, but with the senior, we're not generating any kids with senior residence development. I think it's great to bring it back. I commend you for that. I think there are a couple of things I'd suggest that you look at for these, because these are money makers for the town. And they also support people like me at my age. You might want to relocate to instead of on a half acre, acre, 2 acre lot and a bigger house, you might want to get into a smaller home where someone else is maintaining the yards for you. I think senior residence developments are terrific, and we make money on them, and it grows our grand list. And you're keeping the seniors here instead of having to go, everybody has to go to South Carolina or whatever. It'd be nice to keep some here and they have a reason. We created, about a dozen or 13 of them? Rob mentioned the great one he did off Nevers Road, but we created about 13 of them, but they're small. They're, in my view, too small. So we only ended up with a dozen developments, maximum 25 units. We have a very small number of these units. I think we should eliminate the maximum cap of 25. I think it should be much larger than that. I think if we have some land that may be amenable to that, suitable for that, it should be a larger development. So I think we should get away from the 25. I wrote the original regulations taking off the town of Plymouth. We did that in Plymouth. No town was allowed to do that originally. No town allowed private sector to do senior residence developments. Hal Cummings and others chimed in, said, yes, you can do that. It's legal to do that, to restrict it to 55 and older, not people younger than that. There's case law on that. So we did that. And the first one was Windermere Court, across from the high school and north of the community center. So we started small, 20 units, and then we wanted to grow a little bit, and we said, well, we'll throw in a community center for each individual project, which is very expensive per unit if you have only 25 units. That was because there was demand, the space demands for the senior center were very tight. They had a lot of other uses over there at the community center, recreation department, all that stuff. Well, they moved them over to Wapping, and that alleviated that, instead of having to put a 10,000 square foot addition that was proposed at one point. So that's no longer as much great a need. I don't think the senior center is taxed to great extent by the number of people over there. I think we should encourage this kind of development. I think it'll add to our grand list significantly and address the needs of seniors who have the ability, for the most part, there's people with the ability to buy their own unit. And I think we should take away the cap of 25 so that we can do some larger developments and that don't have to have a community center until you get into a real large one. Work that out, but.
Where's the cap in here?
7.17.5, page
Yes.
26.
Yes, so 2/3 of the way down, page 26, sorry about that. So I think you should take away the cap, and it also is a cap shall not exceed 350 units. Well, that means every time somebody has one, you increase it. I suppose you can do that. That means the regulations don't exist until you find a site that you happen to like it. But the 25 units, it should be, I think it should be much higher than that. And I don't think you should have to have a community center until you have a much larger development. Some building or something, they're very expensive to build with common elements for everybody. So when you have a larger development, I can see that, where you have a place where family can gather that exceeds the capacity of your unit because it's just smaller. I agree with that, than what you had. But I also agree with what Mr. Manarino was saying. I don't think we should have a cap of 2,000 square feet and this 1,800 square feet, which is carryover from the other regulations, and minimum of 1,400 square feet. I don't think we can do that. I think we can do the affordable housing through that percentage thing, but people want some larger units. They want to be able to have their grandchildren stay overnight. You know, they need bedroom for that. The demand seems to be for larger units along that in this town. People want to give up their single-family home on an individual lot and go into this type of development, in a development designed for them, unit designed for them, but they do sometimes like larger units. I don't think we should have a restriction on the size of those. And 15%, again, just like with the multifamily, I suggest you have some kind of incentive for, well, actually, you said 15% was 18% for multifamily. Which I think is high. But if you should have some incentives for density, allow them to increase the density if you're going to increase the affordable requirement, the percentage. 12% again, used to be 10%, now we're up to 12 at Tempo 2, and now we're talking, now for multifamily, talking 15 or 18%. I think there should be incentives in there, allow them to increase the density to get up to that level so they can make up for it, the costs of those units. Again, you talk to the experts in affordable housing in Hartford, they will tell you that they don't make money on the affordable units at 80%. They break even on those at best. So that's a burden on them. But if you can increase the density, increase the percentage, and hopefully it'll work out. And again, it can help us with our tax base. If we don't grow our tax base appreciably every year, the challenge to the town council and the Board of Ed and the decision makers in the town government, how do we cover increased costs, labor and materials and services? How do we cover those costs without additional revenue from increasing your grand list substantially? It's a real burden. And right now, we don't have a large increase in grand list other than maybe motor vehicles this year was pretty substantial. But we don't have a lot of new large projects happening. And we're going to have fewer and fewer sites available for industrial, which has been the backbone of our grand list on the commercial side. We have some residential coming in, retail, but not a lot. So I think you should take that into consideration overall in how you view this thing. But good job. A lot of effort went into this. Thank you very much for volunteering. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on these amendments? Please step forward.
Good evening, Chairman and the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Mark Kazakowski. I serve as a town councilor for the town of South Windsor, and I'm a resident at 863 Clark Street. I'm here wearing two hats, one as a councilor and another as a resident and a town planner myself. I'm a certified planner with the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've been a practicing town planner for 15 years now. So first, I want to thank the commission and Director Leip for the tremendous effort that you went through drafting these regulations. I must say I am totally impressed by the level of input and commitment that you as commissioners did in drafting these regulations, creating regulations in a way that you want to see the town move forward. And it seems like it didn't all fall on the hands of the town planner, but I thank Michelle for her effort too. So first, I just want some general comments. Overall, generally supportive of many of these changes. I'm very supportive of the increase of the inclusionary zoning from 10% to 15% of multifamily for affordable housing. I remember when on a prior development, when you were doing text amendments on Sullivan Avenue, suggesting 15% affordable, 10 got passed, but I'm glad to see it being bumped up to 15% on those regulations and throughout the town. When I think about housing, in town, I look at it through a lens of I would want every resident in South Windsor to be able to live their entire life throughout each stage of their life in town here. So that means you got to have different kinds of housing types, different affordability price points, and you need housing for families, housing for individuals, housing for couples, housing for the elderly. And I think a lot of that is addressed well in our current regulations and with the modifications provided here. What I was hoping to see out of this process, but I think it might be missing, is that there's no really ability or incentive to create small multifamily developments, 3 to 6 units developments. There's not a whole lot of mechanism throughout town through the code, the zoning regulations, or what's permitted in our zones. And I think that is, I would like to see that addressed. I think there's areas in South Windsor that could benefit from possibly a residential conversion of a single family to a 2 or 3 or 4 family, or there could be some aging housing stock that could see properties with redevelopment with these small scale residential developments. I'm looking, the first area you would look at is your core areas. There's plenty of smaller properties in, what we call our downtown in the core area, that could benefit and grow our housing stock with these small-scale developments. And what makes that problem, or even more difficult to get that type of housing, is that in your inclusionary zoning requirements, you state that, or the regulation, the proposal states that developments resulting in the creation of 4 or more multifamily dwelling units shall designate minimum 15%. So if you want, say you wanted to build a 4-unit building, one of them has to be affordable. That's 25% of the units have to be designated as affordable. So that makes it difficult financially right off the bat. And then when you add in having to draft, affordability plans, and then administration to making sure that you're having qualified people rent in these units, just add a layer of complexity that could possibly crowd out small-scale developers that want to, make small improvements. And when you're doing so, having such a requirement, you're moving away from these small things, and you're almost forcing large-scale multifamily developments, large apartment buildings, large apartment complexes. And, and you're losing out on, the 4-unit, where maybe you can have a couple, some multifamily for families, where, you could have a 3 or 4 bedroom apartment in a, 4,000 square foot building with a couple of few units in it. So I would like to see that addressed in this change, in this proposal. I'll take your word for a lot of the the surgical insertions for the changes, and I want to thank the speakers before me who really dove into a lot of those changes. There is one thing, I'm trying to find it right now. It made me hesitate really quick. Just having been doing planning and zoning for years now, I've written regulations, I've interpreted regulations, I've modified regulations to address problems throughout my career. And hold on, I'm trying to find it. Okay, it's in the definitions of what abutting is.
Do you have a chapter and verse?
Yes, section 10.3 definitions, page 33 at the bottom. I'll read it to you, and then I'll point out the problem. And it's an administrative problem. Abutting, properties, definition of abutting, properties that have a common property line separated by no intervening private property. Property separated by a public, private street, or a town right-of-way shall be deemed abutting for notification purposes. I highly suggest putting some sort of boundary on what's across the street, because there's no, when you have a common property line, it's clear, but when it's across the street, it could be interpreted as the entire other side of the street needs to be notified. So directly abutting, from, across the frontage, you can craft something that works. I think Director Lipa understands that part. But that's it. Do you have the intention of holding this public hearing open? Okay, so I'll dive in. If you're gonna be holding it open, I'll be, I'll go into a little more with a sharp pencil into the regulations, but thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor or opposition of these text amendments? Okay.
We did receive one correspondence that you should have for the record from Attorney Chris Smith.
Okay.
Okay, so this is from Alter Pearson LLC Attorneys at Law, Mr. Christopher J. Smith. Dear Chairman Pasiconis, members of the commission, and Director Leip, the undersigned firm represents Evergreen Walk LLC, which is the owner of what is referred to as Unit 8 located within Evergreen Walk. Evergreen Walk's general plan of development currently designates Unit 8 for an independent living facility use subject to additional approvals from the commission. An independent living facility use with affordable housing component provides two important housing type opportunities for the residents of South Windsor: to incentivize potential assisted living facilities and independent living facilities for the residents of South Windsor. Evergreen Walk respectfully requests that the Commission consider reducing the proposed required affordable unit requirement in these two unique housing communities from the proposed 15% to 10%. Please see the red line copy attached here too. This will encourage the development of both uses with an important affordable housing component. It is our understanding that the public hearing concerning the proposed text amendment and others will likely be continued to the Commission's February 28th meeting. We hope to have a report prepared in support of this request to modify the proposed affordable unit component for assisted living and independent living facilities submitted for the Commission's consideration for the February 28, 2023 meeting. Thank you for your anticipated cooperation and assistance concerning this matter. As always, best regards, very truly yours, Christopher J. Smith.
And this is the attachment that was provided.
So the attachment contains a change to section 7.3.10, affordable units. At least, now it reads, at least 10% of the housing units to be provided shall be deed restricted to rent or sell at prices that would make them affordable to persons or families earning 80% or less of the area median income as defined by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for a period of not less than 40 years. See section 2.24, inclusionary zoning for additional requirements.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, at this time, and we do have other business, but I'd like to, if we have no other public input, I'm going to give the commissioners a chance to comment. Now, my plan is to leave this public hearing open. If you don't have any comments at this time, that's fine. You'll have an opportunity at the next public hearing. So if you have something that struck a chord tonight and you'd like to get into it a little or just bring it forward, that's fine. So I'll go to Commissioner Bernstein.
I have a question for one of the speakers.
Follow
Marek, question for you. If that microphone works, maybe you could just stay there. I don't know. Well, does it work?
I'm not hearing it.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So your comments about needing smaller developments,
Mayor, put
4,
your microphone
6
on. Thank you.
units, that made sense to me. And my thought was exactly what you followed it up with, which is if you have the 15% affordable requirement and one of those 4 is affordable, that's 25%. It's tough financially. What I wasn't clear on is if you had a suggestion as to how to remedy that.
I would say, for the record, I'm Mark Hazakowski. I would say change the requirement from any developments 4 units or more require 15% to 7 units or more, because then that or even 6 units, because at that point, that's close to that 15% requirement. So, 1 divided by 6 is 15 points.
So have the 15%
16%.
start at a certain unit
Yeah,
level?
start at either 6, well, I would say probably 7 units,
Okay.
instead of 4.
We may have to look at it also, because if you're looking at multifamily, you gotta have minimum 5 acres, and I don't think you're talking about a 5-acre property either, probably. So we may have to look at it in context of a couple other things as well. But I think, the concern of the committee, if I can just chime in on this, is, every time we create 10 units and we don't have an affordable unit there, we've fallen behind. So the idea was we have to keep up pace as we're creating units. So it's kind of a, where do we start or stop? But I can, listening to Merrick's comments, I can, think of a situation where you have some big houses over on Main Street that might very well easily turn into a 3-unit house without, so maybe it's a different regulation. We want to look at a special exception that allows that kind of a conversion or something. But I think with his suggestion, with the regulation as drafted now, the only way I can think of getting there would be through a multifamily 5-acre minimum piece, and I don't think that's what we're talking about. So we may have to look at that slightly, but maybe I can have a recommendation for our next public hearing on it.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. I guess if I can just add one more thing to that. When we talk about affordable housing, the elephant in the room is, 8-30G, and we're trying to avoid 8-30G appeals. I've seen the ugly head of that type of development and that type of review, and I agree that, that should be addressed. But the other kind of part of affordable housing is that not necessarily, restricted to meet these certain criteria, defined by the state of Connecticut, but really affordable housing based on what the community needs and what they what they can afford. So maybe a family of 4 or 5 or 6, can't afford a single-family house, with the big lot and the big house and extra square footage, but there could be housing out there that could be developed that could support their needs, but at a more affordable rate, might not qualify under, 8-30G, but could be affordable, and support housing, housing needs of the community that way. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Vatiri.
Thank you. There's much of this I want to digest, but for Mr. Damali, I just had one question on the senior residence development. You were talking about changing the maximum number of units from 25. That was 7.17.5. And did you have a proposed number?
Maybe a number, I don't know, maybe 60 or 70 units.
And then you would, I would think that would change the 350 unit maximum.
Yeah, it would go up, because I think we're pretty much at the max.
Yeah, we probably room for a little bit.
Yeah, we're very close to the max, which is a problem, because it means you don't know, where can you go, and you have to go through a lot of effort to get it. I prefer having it zoned for that, up front, but this is a floating zone, so you don't apply it until you, the commission agrees they like the layout, they like the location, and then you can apply it.
Would you think going to that higher maximum number makes it easier for affordable units to be included, or?
Yeah, because, as Mr. Kozakowski was saying, as Merrick was saying, when you've got, the burden of those units and setting it up and hiring an attorney to do the affordable housing component you're requiring, the legal documents, and then following it and tracking it, and then you're not making money on those units, you better have a lot of units in order to justify that kind of thing, I think. I'm in favor of the larger developments, you hit them for it, but the smaller developments, I'm not in favor of it. So maybe we, and I think 18% is a lot, by the way, but I think if you have more units, you can justify doing that stuff, and you spread the costs of the infrastructure over more units. So if you're only breaking even on the 80% affordable units, you're breaking even. So you're not paying for a lot of the other stuff. But if you have enough of these units total, you know, your cost per unit goes down. For the street may be similar costs, and bringing in the sewer and the water and all that stuff, the costs may be fine, but you're getting higher density and you're spreading out over more units and the economics start to work. So I prefer going on to larger projects. I think the smaller ones, I agree with Mark in that, you know, we don't want to discourage those. I recognize, you know, if you have too many of them, all of a sudden you challenge the schools again. But I think we need to have that. We need to address the housing needs of the community, and I think it's the responsibility of the Planning and Zoning Commission to address the unmet needs of the community. And I think I agree with him on that. So I think, yeah, 60, 70 units, something on that order, maybe 80 units, but you, and that way you can justify and you can actually accommodate the need for affordable housing, and it makes economic sense. I think when you get too small, it's too much of a burden.
Would it make sense then as a trade-off if we go much above the 25, then the percentage of affordable could go up from 15 to maybe 20? As an incentive to do it.
20% of units, that's a lot.
No, I'm saying if it's supposed to be
But,
that
but yeah, maybe
more
it's
units.
some kind of sliding scale, sure. You go a sliding scale, and, you know, if it's a smaller development, this is a maximum, but if you go more with a greater percentage of affordable, fine. I don't know what that number is.
No, I'm not
Yeah.
asking for, I'm just.
20% is a
saying that
lot,
might be-
18% is a lot.
I mean, you know, as an incentive to allow us to go above the 25, if that was part of the.
Yeah, I would think a 15% is a pretty good number for
Okay.
that, if you have a large number of units. And then even with that, you might even have a clubhouse, you know, but,
Okay.
because they spread it over many, many units, it makes more economic sense. But, you know, the private sector is going to tell us if it works. If it doesn't work, they're not coming in with a project.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it.
Commissioner Cavagnero.
Thank you. Adjust this. So going through the comments, I don't have any questions, really just comments or additions going on from this. I'm not sure if I have an outdated version, but I'm going to note the page numbers that I have. Going in order on page 5, talking about the table that I have in front of me. It's table 3.1.2A for residential area density and dimensional requirements. I think to go on the point of Town Councilor Kozakowski, this is something I've talked about a lot for a couple times, but for the lot area for multifamily zoning, we're cutting it down from 15 to 5 acres. I'm definitely not opposed to lowering that even further to allow, you know, either smaller units or a smaller amount of units in a multifamily development, since we are sort of mandating it at a minimum of 5 acres. So that is something I'm definitely in support of. Going along to page 9, to table 3.4.5A for the unit mix. This is something I'm still sort of in support of. I praise Peter Damali for coming up and talking about the effect of the unit mix on South Windsor. It may be something that, you know, I'll have to look at and see if it's something that maybe we go back to 50% for one bedrooms for what it was, or revising that. You know, I'll admit my shortcomings on that, because originally I was in support of having it at 60. However, if it's better for the town of either lowering it or just revising the numbers, happy to look at other towns, see what they've done for either affordability requirements for that, or keeping families in the town for that matter. So I'm happy to re-look the unit mix. Then looking at pages 21 and 26, going further with what I think I labeled the caps and maximums. I'm talking here in the red area of page 21. Is it? No, it's in the black area, page 21. Maximum number of, actually, mistake there, not 21, page 26. The maximum here, or the cap, I should say, again, of what Mr. Damali talked about, the maximum number of units in any development shall not be, or shall be 25. I'm, like with Commissioner Viteri here, revising that. Same thing, just in general. Not my philosophy in housing, I guess, is not having too many caps or too many maximums for units, and same thing for lot minimums. So I'm happy to look over those again. And finally, again, in favor of, when we increase affordability, we have to do a lot to accommodate that. So on page 27, where Mr. Damali was talking about density bonuses, I'm definitely in favor of exploring that, see how it impacts the town. And I guess the only thing, I've expressed this comment before, but, setback regulations that we have, I forgot what page it's on, I haven't marked it, but definitely in favor of either revising to lower those setbacks. I think in some of our regulations, we have it to increase the setbacks for larger parcels of land. But I think for that, I'd be fine with what it's at right now, but also if we're able to lower the setback requirements, I'd definitely be happy to see what those numbers look like. Other than that, I do have comments for the 2129 parking, which I'll save for later on in the night. So thank you very much.
If you have, okay, that's a separate, okay.
It is separate, but within the document that we have here, it does talk about 2129 parking. So I'm not sure if you want me to hold on to it or
If you have it, it's only going to be a minute or something, right, talking about it?
Yeah, I guess it's 30 seconds. Going along with, sort of my philosophy on some of these mandates, I guess going back on it and giving a wider context, one vote, in the past, when we voted to opt out of 2129, the ADU parking requirements, I think looking back on it, I'm not sure I entirely agree with my vote on that, to vote for that. So I think for this, I'm not sure I'm entirely in favor of voting to opt out of the 2129 parking requirements, if I can find my agenda here. For subdivision regulations here, for me, we're not removing parking. It's simply just removing a mandate. Developers, they'll put as many parking spaces as they think they'll need. I don't think, again, putting some sort of cap there is going to...
Okay, let's talk about that under that item.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is that it? Yeah, that's it. Okay, Commissioner Wagner?
Mr. Manarino.
Put your microphone on, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't following along with you when you were talking about some of the unit requirements. Now I've lost my notes even on that, but
I think I was talking about
you
the
have some
size.
specific changes that you want to...
Yeah, the size, it was mostly on the SRD, which I'm also happy that came back. Just the size of the units was a restriction that goes back to when the DA-15 was originally put together, 1,400 square feet, 1,600 square feet, 2,000 square feet, and that goes back to like the mid-'80s. So I'd like to see a revision there. I never really understood why we had the restriction in the size. As a developer and as someone who has done all of these developments that you talk of in regards to the affordable housing components, things of that nature, a 1,600 square foot unit costs the same to build almost as a 2,000 square foot unit. You still have a furnace, you still have a kitchen, you still have a driveway. So that restriction, and I know we fought, not that we fought, but we came and asked permission to have 1,800 square foot units, which was something that was a process also, because it was originally 1,600 square foot units. So I really would like to see that come up to 2,200 square foot units. Maybe the affordable ones could be 1,600 square feet. But you also have to look at when the SRD is, and I'm not prepared tonight, but I'm going to come back on the 28th, from our latest development, which was a DRZ, it had an affordable component. With CROG, when they come up with the calculations, a two-bedroom unit is 80% of medium income. As you get to a three-bedroom unit, they add a factor to it so that the income can go higher. And as you get to a four-bedroom unit, which is the highest, which is the only one that makes sense for the builder or developer to give the unit away, because that's basically what we do. Peter is correct on that information. We just have to look at that, because the SRD before only allowed a two-bedroom unit. And when we did Eagle Run, we did a two-bedroom with an office, which is the most popular, but still would be considered a two-bedroom. And it's going to be almost impossible to deliver an affordable single-family unit. Maybe the multifamily guys could do that. I'm a single-family guy. So I'm going to come back with some numbers for you, because I'm going to get the updated numbers from CROG for the next meeting. So you just understand that, what we're gonna be selling a unit for, which could be $250,000 for a two-bedroom unit. And as you add the coefficient to it for more bedrooms, the coefficient goes higher. Like when I did those developments off, the last one, Schoolhouse Drive, we made sure we built only 4 bedrooms because that allowed us to sell the unit for more money, still within the reason of, it still met the affordable requirements. I'm not sure if that answers your questions, but we do need larger units in order for it to make it work.
I was looking for specific changes. Maybe you can come back with that.
Okay, sure.
And then I think an issue that has come up a couple of times now is there's this state concept of affordable housing, which is very precisely defined. And then there's a question of what can other people afford to live in, which may be a little more expensive than the 80% type of unit. I mean, is there anything in our regulations that you would talk about changing that would make it possible for people who don't meet that 80% thing to afford to live here? I mean, are we doing things that are making
I think the
the
intent.
town unaffordable for other people?
No, I don't think so. I think the intent is in the right direction. I have 5 kids myself, and in some instances, if I'm not helping them, they're not living in town, So, and some have moved out of town. But the intent is there. The reality is, it's very, very challenging. I know when we did it, I'll just take Schoolhouse Drive, 'cause that's the last one we did, there was 14 units. We had 3 that we had put in the affordable program, and we essentially sold the units for less than cost because you have to find and convince someone to buy the units. In Simsbury, there's a gentleman out there, Sunlight Construction. Michelle, I think you're familiar with the development. He hasn't built many of his affordable units because he just can't figure out how to sell it. Because in our town, when I did the units, there was some flexibility on how we could interpret the regulation with CROG. In Simsbury, it's a hard line, and he just can't get someone to fit in that pivot. So he has probably, of the 20 units he has to build, I think he still has like 14 left, and this is 3-4 years later, where he struggles to do that. I know the intent is there, it's just very challenging. It's very challenging, and I know you've got a lot of different things pulling you in different directions. But for me, I'm very excited about the SRD, and I'm hoping that I can come back with you to propose changes, at least to the sizes of the units. I definitely agree with Peter, if he's still here, on the amount of units. 20 units is difficult, especially with the affordable component that you're gonna add in there. And everyone's gonna wanna do 20 units. I know RSK Kelco did 25 units and he had to do a clubhouse, but I know for us, we stuck to 20 units because the cost benefit wasn't there, so. But I love that zone, and I love working with those people. They're great
Thank
to
you.
work with, so. All right, thank you.
Mr. Kozakowski. I appreciate your concern about the smaller multifamily, not, making it difficult for them. We do have a number of places in here where we talk about a fee in lieu approach for them, for anybody, actually. I mean, does the fee in lieu of building that one unit, is that maybe a better way to encourage development of small multifamily houses, and is there something in here that isn't doing that?
I mean, I'd say maybe, but I guess it would have to, the amount of the fee would be the most important factor with that. Because if, the small scale developments, the margins are thinner than building a 100-unit, apartment building. So I guess as long as the fee is scaled appropriately, I mean, that could work, but I don't, I didn't do any sort of analysis on, or have the know-how or technical know-how of doing that sort of analysis, given the market.
I mean, I think the concept is that everybody who builds something here contributes in one way or another to us meeting our goal with affordable housing, but not necessarily building units in every case. I mean, you build a development with, really big houses. I think a fee in lieu is probably more appropriate than building another unit in that development. So I think maybe that's an approach to this, and maybe when you think about it, come back to us. That'd be
Yeah.
something to talk about.
Yeah, I guess that could be, anything can be an approach. That could be an approach. It's just a matter of doing the economic analysis of, is it still financially feasible to make a small multifamily development and still pay the fee? Can you make the numbers work? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe if we had a real estate expert, or a developer of these developments to weigh in on that, that would be probably good for the process.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Dexter.
Just a question, kind of a little housekeeping, Michelle, because we've got a lot of good input tonight, and it would be great to see it all on our next public hearing. Would it be the intention of the subcommittee to meet again between now and then to go through some of this?
Actually, with your public hearing held open, it really wouldn't be appropriate to do
Oh, okay,
that. No,
okay.
I think really the next step would really be, to close your public hearing and then work on what changes that you wanted to make. There may, you may have some things that you want to direct me to do and make some changes to offer to you based on that, but it really wouldn't be appropriate for a subcommittee meeting.
Okay. Good.
Commissioner Carey.
Just briefly, I thought the whole conversation on the SRDBs, the project unit caps, and also the size, it was really interesting and something that we should explore. Sorry.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
I know.
Maybe
I've been
tilt
having
your microphone
these-
down a little.
Yeah.
Yours might be off right now.
I found this really hard to hear everybody today.
Okay, maybe we can get a little coaching or whatever on how these work best. I know on the previous one, that we were told, a certain dimension worked best. I don't know what
I
happens
think
with
you're
these.
supposed to get close to them.
Close to these? Let's see. Is that better?
I think
Is
so.
that better?
Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on 7.17.5 on page 26, I think that, the questions around the maximum number of units, page 26, 7.17.5, I just thought the discussion around the maximum number of units in any development, as well as, the total 350 units is worth exploring. And then I also thought on page 27, 7.17.7 D, the maximum unit size for all units around square footage was also worth exploring. That's all.
So similarly, I heard, what Mr. Manarino said and Mr. Damali said, and what you guys just talked about on page 27, 17.7D. I'm also interested in the research that you would do to figure out what those caps should be, because it seems like there are some concerns there with the square footage being too small. That's it.
Goodness. Thank you, Alan. Oh, that's much better, huh? First off, I just want to say this whole, I don't know if you want to call it an exercise or this changing of the regulations has been a massive undertaking, and a lot of it is a lot of firsts for us. And contemplating all the changes, and I think the language that we have is a good starting place. I don't think any of us expected to have all the answers or to get everything to everybody's pleasing at this time. I think there's a lot of work that's been done. I know there's going to be a lot of changes in the future. There always is. There's always improvements. There's always experience that dictates changes. But I think you really need to get that experience first. Right now, some of our time constraints are dictated by when the moratorium ends. And we can move forward and get some approvals and make some changes in the future, or we could put in an extension to the moratorium and then make some changes. But it all depends on when this commission wants to move forward with the language. You know, we could bounce things back and forth, but that's not going to get us to our place unless we really decide. I'm mixed on some of the suggestions that I've heard tonight. Whenever you add square footage, I understand the bedrooms, but you're not renting them out by the bedroom. You're renting them out to residents. And anytime you add square footage, I mean, a kitchen's going to cost, it's going to be one of your most expensive items. So there's a given cost for a kitchen. But when you're adding square footage, you're talking about increasing the cost of the unit. That's just a fact, okay? So do you want affordable units that seniors can afford to move in? Or do you want only the people who can afford the more expensive units in these units? And Alan had mentioned possibly cutting back the one-bedroom units. And when you look at a lot of the units that have been approved in the past, a lot of the complexes we had only had two-bedroom units. There were no options for people who could only afford a single bedroom. So, you know, some of this is helping to correct that, but it doesn't do it, I don't think, drastically. So we've got a lot of good language here, and I think this is a starting point. I would just caution the commission about making too many changes that are going to drag this out longer and need us to take, I mean, if you want to start doing a lot of research on what choices we have and everything else, then I wouldn't go with a 4-month extension for the moratorium. I would say a 6-month or a 9-month moratorium extension. So Rob, I think, was very happy with moving something forward. But I would just caution you that let's not mix it up too much. Let's try and get something done here so that we can move forward. And then we can always make additional changes in the future. Merrick had mentioned about the smaller units, and that was something that we wrestled with because, you know, maybe we could do a 0.5, you know, or a 50% cost or fee in lieu of. But we were trying to make it more defined. And we knew there was going to be a little bit of, if you want to call it discontent for, say, between 3 and 6 units. But in order to move forward, we set the parameters at what we set them forward so that we could move forward. And I didn't think it was something that we'd be able to address right now, get it approved and everything else. I thought that was something that we should look at in the future about how we can improve that. So I appreciate everybody from the public who came out. I value your input. I think there's been some good suggestions here. But again, some of those suggestions might need more research in the future after our regulations are in place. So that's about all I have tonight to say. What I'd like to do is extend this public hearing to our next meeting on the 28th. I'm sure some of our people are going to come back with additional ideas or fine tuning, which is fine. That's what we hold public hearings for. At this time, I'll ask for a motion to continue the public hearing to the 28th. Microphone, please.
I move to continue the public hearing to the 28th.
Okay, we have a
Second.
motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Michelle, before we move forward, is there anything, are you
No,
all
that's-
set?
Vote
Okay,
good for that date, yep.
okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to extend the public hearing to the 28th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, our next item for public hearing is number 2, PZC proposal to opt out of provisions of the Public Act 2129. And, pardon? At this time, I'll turn to our Director of Planning, Michelle Light.
So again, part of the Public Act that was adopted last year, and essentially.
Excuse me, if you could bring it outside, thank you, or in the lobby, thank you.
What it basically states is a commission can't require more than one parking space per unit in a multifamily development. I think that works a lot better in urban city areas where you have much more opportunity for transit things. We had quite a bit of evaluation of parking when we did our town center regulation a couple years ago, and I think we came up with a 1.75 factor between a 1 and 2 bedroom. And that was really based on what, we were told by developers at the time of what the need was, with the thought being as we became more built up that maybe we wouldn't need as much parking. I do agree with Commissioner Cavanero that a developer typically builds what they think they need for parking, whether we have a minimum or not. I guess my only concern would be when you didn't have that developer that was conscious of that, was more concerned about just meeting the minimum requirement, and then you had a parking shortage. So I would recommend that you opt out of it at this time. And again, maybe something you revisit later on, but my experience has been we don't tend to have over parking requirements in our multifamily zone.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll ask if there's anybody from the public, if they have anything they'd like to bring forward, either in favor or against. Now's the time. Hearing and seeing none, we'll turn to commissioners. Commissioner Quarishi.
I have no comments or
Okay,
questions.
Commissioner Carey.
No comments.
Commissioner Dexter.
No comment.
Commissioner Wagner.
Does this also require a town council?
Yes, it would be the same process as the accessory apartment process.
Thank you. That's all.
Commissioner Cavagnero.
I can't remember what other comments I had, so no comment.
Okay. Commissioner Viteri.
No comment.
Commissioner Bernstein.
No comment.
Okay, and I support the town planner in this proposal and what the commission has talked about. And as Steve pointed out, a recommendation from us would also go to the town council for one of their public hearings. And
Or a meeting, they would pick it up, but they don't.
okay. At this time, do we have a written motion on this or no?
I don't
Just-
have it on for a decision. You could add it to the agenda to decide on it. It's
Oh,
just
if we don't
a
have it
public
on for a
hearing.
decision, then,
You just have it at public hearing right now.
okay. So if there's no other questions, comments, concerns, we'll close the public hearing and we'll address it on at our meeting on the 28th also. Everybody good with that? Okay. So we'll close this public hearing and we'll move on to our next public hearing, which is PZC-sponsored subdivision text amendment. I'll turn it to our Director of Planning, Michelle Bite.
Your presentation had kind of combined the two set of regulations, so the subdivision regulations you had reviewed, and I think, Chairman, you reviewed those in the public hearing. These don't get sent to CROG for any review, so there was not a referral notice sent. So again, I think we had some comments from the public on the subdivision regulations, but it would really be up to any commission comments that you have or questions. Be glad to field on those.
Okay. Is there anyone for the public who would like to speak in favor or against this text amendment?
Okay, for the record, Mark Kozakowski, 863 Clark Street, wearing my town planner hat. My comments has to do with the affordable housing requirement for subdivisions greater than 6 units. I see you have two options here. When an affordable unit is required, you require either a fee in lieu of or dwelling units being designated as affordable. My suggestion is to just stick to the fee in lieu of and save yourself the headache of requiring single-family homes, private single-family homes to be restricted for affordable housing. In a community that I worked for, very similar to South Windsor in both size and demographics, they had regulations like that it was like an overlay zone for subdivision developments of single-family units where they had an affordable component. It was enacted in the early 90s, I believe, and it yielded two large-scale developments in the 90s. And let me tell you, the affordable, so it required a certain percentage of the units be affordable, or lots, be affordable with single-family houses on it. It was before my time, but what the stories that I heard is when developers were building those houses, they wouldn't finish them. They would do the minimum requirements to get their certificate of occupancy, leaving some walls exposed, not painted, finishes aren't done. Any method that they could use to save cost on these units, they did it. So that's problem number one. So people that are going to buy an affordable unit, affordable house, are going to buy something that's probably not going to be finished, to full extent. The second part of that is I see in your proposal that you have the South Windsor Human Services Department administering the review of, the qualifications for affordability. Not a week went by when the Director of Human Services in the community that I work for came to my office and asked to somehow get that requirement repealed because of the administrative burden of doing those types of reviews, were what they were. They didn't, in his office, he didn't have anybody, I'll use air quotes, qualified to do that type of review, because it's very a financial review. And then getting the requirements to do that review from prospective buyers is a challenge in itself. And then, that's just, ended up being a nightmare. And then, okay, so you have somebody that bought a house, might be finished, probably not, 10 years later, 15 years later, their housing needs change, 20 years later, and they want to sell their house. They might have forgotten that they purchased it under affordable, affordable restrictions. They might try to ignore it. A real estate agent, they might not disclose it to a real estate agent, and it gets listed as market rate. Well, that's a problem in itself. And then you add in another layer of, okay, we recognize that unit on the market as supposed to be, restricted to affordable, and then convincing that the owner that they have to do this, and in the real estate agent who might not understand or have ever dealt with this before is a challenge in itself. And then my last point is that when the potential resale of a single-family house is constrained by an affordability requirement, it creates a disincentive to make any cosmetic or updating improvements to the home over the years. So, as somebody with an out-of-date kitchen might upgrade it before they sell because they'll get $2 for each dollar that they spent on it in return. They won't get that type of return on making the improvements. So 20 years later, you're going to have a 20-year-old kitchen, 30-year-old kitchen that is not going to be updated, for the next buyer. And you're selling it to a buyer that might have just enough funds to buy their first home, but then have no money left over to make the improvements for themselves. So, I can beat this a little more, but I would say save yourself the trouble. Just go with the fee in lieu of. It's cleaner. I think you have a formula that I didn't analyze it, but I'll assume that it works, and just go with that. The second point, now I'm going to put my town councilor hat on. This is going to this fee in lieu of, whether it's for subdivisions or multifamily development, it's going to create funds. There's going to be money held in an account for something, which I don't know is entirely defined. And so I think it's in the responsibility of working with the commission and town council to figure out what this fee in lieu of funds are going to be used for. I remember in your affordable housing plan, it described creating some sort of affordable housing advisory committee. And I think this is the time to really start thinking about that and what that's going to look like. We are in the process of creating a fair rent commission, and it was suggested earlier in the process where there might be, or in review of the affordable housing plan, there might be opportunities to combine those. I don't know if that's the right approach. I don't know if it's the wrong approach, but that's something that on the town council side, that effort should and will be started to be looked at. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I can just make a brief comment on that, I was asked by the town manager to draft up something along a housing committee for an ordinance, and I have drafted something and forwarded to the town attorney, kind of combining a housing committee with a fair rent commission kind of umbrella. So that is something that is going to be looked at through the town council. So, and it would have some of the goals of our affordable housing plan as part of this housing committee to look at. So we'll keep you posted as.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this? Either in favor or against? Hearing none, we'll turn to commissioners. Commissioner Bernstein.
The only comment is I appreciated Merrick's input, and I think it's something we should consider. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Viteri.
I also thank you, Merrick, for the comments, but nothing else.
Commissioner Cavagnaro.
Thank you. I guess I'll extend my thanks as well for the comments. I only have a quick comment on page 6. I think these are the right regulations we're talking about, the subdivision regulations here. Is that the right one?
Yep.
Yep. So on page 6, I see a paragraph in red added. It's the third paragraph, and this is just from me reading it. My idea here from reading it, and of course, it says if the rear of the houses will be facing a collector street.
This is under Chapter 4, B4, second paragraph.
My apologies. Yes, on chapter or page 6. A collector street, a landscaping treatment, for example, berm with plantings. It basically states that some sort of berm or planting or trees or fencing or screening of that nature shall be required if the rear of the house faces, like I said, a collector street or a landscaping treatment. My only comment on that is I'm not entirely sure, or well, let me rephrase that. Looking at it, I kind of struggle with that. My reason with that is it may drive up, I'm not going to say the value of the house that's for sale, I should say. But for example, if the house is on the market, for example, it's just built and it requires, let's say, a bunch of trees are planted in the back where a road is facing, or the house is facing a road, it may drive up the price of a house, not by much, but it may drive up the price of a house, maybe a couple $100 looking at it. That's just my inference from it. I'm not sure if we want to keep that as a requirement, but that's just the inference that I'm getting from that paragraph right there. But that's the only comment I have. I'm not sure on that aspect of it. Everything else I don't have a comment on so far.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wagner.
Well, thank you, Merrick, for your comments. I thought they were very helpful. You were actually looking at the regulation that applied to single-family housing when we were talking, but I think the comments would also apply to condominiums. I don't know how they apply to rental units. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that, but did you have the same problems with condominiums that you had with single-family houses?
I've had less problems for multifamily condominiums. I'm sure it would be the same for owner-occupied, a similar situation for owner-occupied condos and multifamily units. Renters, I would assume that it's a little less problematic because, they have to keep their units, competitive in makeup. It's when there's, I'm speaking a little out of turn, but there's more housing options out there for renter apartments. So if the quality of a unit doesn't meet the specifications of a prospective tenant, there's other options out there. So it's not a great answer, but it's something.
Right. Now, I'm having trouble understanding how a CO was given to a house that wasn't finished. Is it maybe something, I'm inclined to actually agree with your suggestion, but if we don't adopt it, is there something we can do in the regulations that make sure that the house is actually finished before it's sold as an affordable house?
Well,
Well, the affordable units, we do have single families that are affordable units. They come out of our DRZs. So we do have that experience. So they're not single family lots, but they are single family houses. And they are administered through Human Services. And it is challenging. I will agree with that. We have often talked about making a third-party reviewer do that review and having the cost be borne by the person selling the house. That might be something we want to add to that. We haven't had the experience that Mark's talking about because none of our units are that old. All of our DRZs that have them were built in the 2016 and later. Whether or not that'll be our experience in, 20 years from now when someone wants to sell the house, it's a deed-restricted house. They are deed-restricted, so a title search should pick up that they have a deed requirement on it. They are noted in the assessor's office that they are an affordable unit. So there are some, flags that we have in our town that a person buying a unit. One of the things that we are suggesting with our Affordable Housing Committee that we created, this housing committee, I really feel strongly that we need to be tracking our affordable units a little bit closer into the future because they do have a time element associated with them. So if they're 40 years and they fall off, we need to know that. We're new into this business. We're only 20 or 30 years into it. But when you had a 40-year deed restricted, we're only 10 years away from that. So, we really do need to up our affordable housing, I don't want to say surveillance, but, how the requirements are being met. I can tell you we had an affordable unit that was sold and the new deed didn't reference the original affordable documents. Well, we had that rectified. So moving into the future, it may get a little bit more complicated, and I do agree that a Human Services Department is not equipped to do this analysis, and that's really where we really need to get into a third-party reviewer for those units that do go to sale. The state of Connecticut Department of Housing is great as far as giving a formula and help us fit it in, but, I'm not depending on the interest rate, it's going to depend on where a person can come into the market. And, that changes. I mean, it was really great for a long time, and you could sell these units really expensive. You can't sell them quite as expensive anymore because people can't qualify anymore. So it is going to be something that's going to change as time goes on in the future. So I think I can appreciate collecting money as far as these subdivisions. I think it's a very easiest way to do it. But we do have units out there right now, and I suspect we'll get more as time goes on that are not rental units and that are deed restricted. So I think, again, this is what I'm hoping with this housing committee, that we can build a little more structure into monitoring our affordable housing. We're putting the onus on the developer or the owner of an apartment building to yearly let us know that he's meeting all the requirements. We may want to send a letter out on an annual basis to the people that have units, hey, just reminding them, you have these units. I've had people put money into these affordable units and they want it out, and you don't get that out unless it's, something that's needed for a unit. You can't just put in landscaping and say, oh, geez, I get $10,000 more because I did that. So there's an education for these affordable units. We're pretty new into it, especially the single-family housing units, but we do have some that are deed restricted that we will deal with as they go through resale.
Okay, but my question dealt with the comment that you made that some of the houses were not actually complete when they were sold, the affordable units. Because I just don't understand how
You don't
that
need a
can happen.
carpet to get a CO.
Yeah, it's
You don't need.
requirements of a CO, yeah. It's not, it's not a finished house necessarily. It's the minimum building requirements having been met.
Maybe we need to do something about that?
I mean, if you want to put some kind of requirement on your approval of an affordable unit, it's got to be inspected and have X, Y, Z in it. I mean, that would be something that's part of a special exception approval you could do. But, again, at the time of a CO, the building official's looking for compliance with the building code. And there's things that you and I would think have to be there that, don't necessarily have to be there.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Commissioner Dexter.
No further comment.
Commissioner Carey.
No further comments.
Okay, Commissioner Quarishi.
No comments.
Okay. I too appreciate your comments, Merrick, regarding the fee in lieu of. And again, that was something that we struggled with. And we put a fee in lieu of formula in there, but in thinking about it, I'm thinking that formula might be a little bit low for the balance of it. You can always charge a fee, but is the fee actually going to build any units? And will it be enough? But that's something that we put a minimal fee in there of, I think, like 5%. But I think what some other towns did was make it higher than that, like maybe 10 or 15. I think, did Tallinn at one point have 20%?
I think Glastonbury was 20% that I saw at Tallinn, I think, had 10, but they reduced it to 5 in their final documents. But Glastonbury had proposed 20, but I don't believe it has been adopted.
Okay. But it's something I would just like to take a look at again. Other than that, I didn't have anything else. Paul, did you have something?
I have to admit my ignorance on this fee in lieu issue. I kind of get what it's supposed to do, but how does that help the person who wants to rent or buy who's a little bit financially strapped? It doesn't help that person at all, and that is who the whole affordable thing is supposed to help. So am I missing something, or help me understand this?
Well, if it was an affordable unit, there wouldn't be a fee, okay? So that would be, and there are other options out there for affordable units. I know I was just talking to one of my kids about the incentives that are out there as far as getting an affordable unit, like $50,000 incentives that I've seen advertised sent to me. And, you know, some of them help pay down on the principal, some of them help with the initial deposits, other type of variables like that.
If I could comment too, there's some other communities that have these funds that they create, and some of the uses of the funds that this money goes into might be seed money for your housing authority to do a housing project. Or it might be a nonprofit coming and want to do affordable housing in your community, and you know, you give them some money to help them along on that. So ultimately, it helps create some more affordable housing. I think those are some of the, you know, the creative things that you look to try to do with some of these affordable housing funds, housing trust funds that you create. So it's kind of like stay tuned, and hopefully we can develop some of those things. But I think, again, as was mentioned tonight by a couple of the speakers, it's not like we have a lot of land left to subdivide. So I don't think we're going to get our huge affordable housing funds from our subdivisions. I mean, I think our affordable housing is really going to be coming through our multifamily developments, because that tends to be where we'll get the highest percentage of them.
All right, that makes sense. All right, thanks.
Okay. Okay, does anybody else have anything that they want to? Okay. At this time, Michelle, you suggest keeping this open, or?
I think I would suggest keeping the subdivision and zoning both open, just so in case anybody didn't want to make it tonight on Valentine's Day, they can still comment on the 28th.
Okay, fair enough. So at this time, I would ask if anybody wanted to make a motion to continue this public hearing until our 28th date also.
I move that we carry it over to the 28th.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to continue our public hearing to the 28th for the subdivision text amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that concludes our public hearing. Now our regular meeting, I'll call that to order. First item on our agenda is public participation. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on anything that is not on our agenda? Please step forward. Hearing and seeing none. Our next business item is minutes for January 24th and January 31st. I just had one minor addition. I think it's to the 31st, that our hearing, there was a motion to adjourn, seconded, and it said meeting adjourned at 9:02 p.m. I think those should always say motion passed unanimously approved, if unanimously approved. And that was January 24th, I'm sorry. Does anybody have anything else for 24th or the 31st? If not, we can adopt these as modified by consensus. Agreed? Okay. Okay, our next item is new business, application 22-41P, which is the telecommunications facility zone change check text amendment. I'll turn to our Director of Planning, Michelle Light.
Yeah, thank you. So you should have received in your packet some revised language based on our close of the public hearing. We requested some language before you acted on it. I think this takes in pretty much the comments that were made at the hearings. So it would be, if the commission's comfortable, ready for action. And I think I gave you approval conditions with a potential effective date if you do choose to act on it. Thank you.
Okay. So we have this, I see Alan has his light on. What do you got?
Yes, quick comment. I talked about this last meeting, about the legal loophole on page 2 of the, we're on the telecommunication facilities text amendment, right?
Correct.
Yes, page 2 on 7-18-4, point D. I would just recommend adding a comma after the word playground. A developer could.
What number?
Point D on the very bottom, 7 dash.
D, yep.
Yes. I just recommend adding a comma after the word playground. Any developer could come in and make the argument saying, and again, since there is no comma, could come in and say that this playground is not primarily attended by people less than 18 years of age and plop a tower right next to it. Adding a comma differentiates a school that is attended by people less than 18 and just a playground. So I just recommend adding a comma after the word playground. That's it.
Okay. Did anybody have any other comments? Questions? Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, I guess I still don't see an item J of 718.4. Why are we distinguishing between town-owned facilities and other people who might want to build a tower?
J. Could you repeat that again,
Okay.
Steve?
It says town-owned communication towers may also be of lattice design provided that the height does not exceed 150 feet and the base of the tower footprint does not exceed 20 by 20 foot area. I mean, if you take out the word town-owned, to me that's treating everybody the same as the town.
I think some of the thought in that was most of the other communication towers are all monopole and not lattice design. But they're taller.
Right, well, that's why there's a restriction of 150 feet.
Michelle, do you know if we have any?
You know, again, it goes kind of to the original drafting of this regulation was the commission wanted strictly monopole towers. So by allowing a lattice tower in the town to do it, you're still restricting the number of them by only allowing the town to be the applicant to do that. You certainly can open it up to anybody doing a lattice tower, but again, it originally was driven by a commission desire not to see lattice towers in town. Because they tend not to be as clean looking and they can be, you know, bigger looking. But again, it really is a.
Okay, so what are you suggesting, Steve?
Well, I would drop the word town-owned from that, but that would be only if everyone else agrees with me.
So would just start with communication towers may also be of lattice design.
And of strictly out of fairness, but I don't know if there's anybody out there who'd want to build one, only 150 feet tall, so,
Commissioner Carey?
I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, the commercial towers, one, that they're carrying much bigger equipment, okay? This tower is not carrying cell phone equipment. It's carrying, right, repeaters and some other things. And, commercial towers are taller and they're carrying heavy-duty equipment, and therefore they're designed to collapse upon themselves so they don't hurt anybody. So I think that, it was probably a good idea to put that in our regulations, and I don't see any really good reason to change it. I think we're being asked to change it for the town because we need repeaters, because we've got fire and safety people who can't, that need these signals amplified so that they can hear. But I don't think we should do it for commercial towers.
Okay. Commissioners, any input?
For what it's worth, I agree with Carolyn.
I can't hear you.
I agree with Carolyn.
Okay. Anyone else? So this is allowing the town-owned communication towers to also be of lattice versus the monopole. Michelle, do you know if we have any commercial communication towers that are less than 150 feet or less?
I don't believe so. I think they're at least a minimum of 150 feet, any of the monopoles I can think of.
Because
There may be some older ones that I just, prior to our regulations that I'm not aware of, but the ones I think of are monopoles that are 150 plus.
I believe structurally, the monopole's a stronger tower, and that's why they're utilized. They're also more expensive. This would be only towers up to 150 feet, and I'm thinking that I would stay with the language as it currently is.
Okay, can I make a motion?
Pardon me?
I make a motion.
Yeah,
I move we approve application 22-41P, telecommunication facility zone text amendment, request by Town of South Windsor to modify section 718.4, general requirements, subsection D and J, to allow for commercial wireless towers owned by the town to be of lattice design, limited in size, as presented to us.
Second.
okay, we have motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Cavagnero?
Yes, my comment that I made with adding the comma, is that incorporated into this motion, or do we have to do that
Yes,
separately?
I'll incorporate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And the seconder agrees
I'll
with that?
accept the
Okay.
change, yeah.
And we have a finding that it's in conformance with the Plan of Conservation Development and effective date as
Yeah,
well?
there was,
Yes, of course.
where is that?
That's on your,
Didn't find the motion here, but maybe it's here.
Yeah, we got so many papers here
There it
tonight.
is, okay.
Yeah, please, thank you. Oh, Steve's got it. Thank you. Do you want to,
Yeah. The Planning and Zoning Commission finds that the zone text amendment in conformance with the town plan is in conformance with the town plan of conservation and development. The effective date of the zone change zone text changes March 2, 2023.
okay, and our seconder is good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I apologize, but I didn't quite hear. Are we changing the commercial towers, or are we leaving them alone?
No change.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move the motion. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, our next is bonds. Did we have bonds?
No, you do not.
Okay. Old business, Michelle?
No, I do not have any old business for you.
Okay. We had a couple applications we received. Other than that, I think our business is concluded tonight. There was a conference. I believe you have to notify staff if you want to go by Tuesday, March 21st. Okay? So the sooner she knows, the better. I've got to look at my calendar, and I'm sure a few other people do, but ideally, if you know by the next meeting or the meeting even after that, that would be fine. So other than that, I think our business for the evening is concluded, and a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion, we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you, everybody.